So Dave, I got to tell you, I've been listening to TV commercials for the first time in maybe 5 years. I haven't since switching. I cut the cable a while ago, and my family's been listening to Netflix and Hulu and all this stuff. We don't get a lot of TV commercials, except. Right. As you know, I like to find something that's just interesting enough to listen to while I'm penciling and inking my comic.
Right, so it's like the birding channel or something,
Exactly. Yes. Just interesting enough, or stuff that I've heard or seen 1,000 times before. Right. And I was flipping through. I've got a Roku stick, that's like an Amazon Fire or Chromecast.
Sure. Yeah.
Up in my bedroom where I've got a satellite studio set up, and I found something called Pluto TV. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Pluto, as in the planetette? What do they call it now?
Yes.
Planet T. What is Pluto now technically called?
Pluto is a dwarf planet.
A dwarf planet. Although they're thinking about changing it again, I heard.
They fuck with Pluto every 3 years. It's unbelievable.
They give. I like how Pluto's from your neighborhood, and you're like, they're always messing with my boy Pluto. Oh, they don't give that boy no respect.
I called up Pluto. I said, I don't respect you. So I'm watching Pluto TV, and it's got all of these, it's got live channels, it's got some feeds from different networks and stuff. But the thing it's got that I'm just enraptured with, it's got like the Addams Family channel. You click on the Addams Family channel, it's just Addams Family episodes, one after another, after another,
from the 60s?
After another.
Like the old black and white?
Yeah, the old black and white. They've got the Degrassi high school series. They've got an entire channel just full of MST3K, just one after the other.
Oh, that I could. Although that you kind of need to watch, because the beauty of that is the reaction to. But keep going.
Pairing.
Yeah, but Addams Family, you get it. They're in a lot of makeup. They're walking around. They're doing their thing. Yeah,
and the voices are very recognizable. And they've got something that I am just in love with: the Johnny Carson channel. All old Tonight Show episodes, the full episodes, and they'll group them like they'll have, here's the Burt Reynolds pack, and it'll be Burt Reynolds in the 1970s, the time that Burt Reynolds was on the show in the 1980s, and
what?
It's the full.
I was
episode.
about to say, who the hell is watching this? But apparently it's Brad Geiger.
And they're like, at one moment he's coming out in plaid leisure suits. Oh, that's 1970s Johnny. Next moment he's coming out in a more up to date attire. That's 1980s Johnny. You get Johnny from all these times, and again, it's the full episode, so you get all the bits, the little desk pieces, him talking with Ed, all the other people and stars that come in. And again, they're all of these celebrities, some of whom you haven't seen in 100 years, and it is the best, because again, it's not going to be distracting. I'm not going to look up, but I can sit and listen to that shit for hours.
Okay, I got to ask you this, because clearly you're leaning into something with the commercials, but I wanna ask you, because this is an interesting psychological thing.
Yeah.
You know there's that saying that the past is a holiday. The past is a vacation, that kind of thing. But for you love diving into nostalgic television. Yeah. What is that about your personality? Did you not get TV as a kid? Is that what it is?
No, we got TV, but I mean, for the early part of us getting TV, there was just the 3 channels, and I was trying to explain this to my college class when I was showing them that part of the Bugs Bunny Halloween special, which had a point in the overall lecture, but it was like, if you missed it. You missed it. You had to come back another year and hope that you were in front of the TV at the right time. But like, we didn't get cable until much, much later. But no, it wasn't that. You know what? I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you absolutely what it is. And it's maybe a little bit rose-colored glasses. It might be a little bit of ignorance on my part. But you see Johnny come out and he'll start talking about Ronald Reagan. Well, I got to tell you, Ed, this Ronald Reagan. He's going to be a really, oh gosh, that wasn't even close to Johnny Carson.
No, that was pretty good. That was
a better Ronald Reagan than it was Johnny. But he'll tell it, Joe, and it's like, oh my God, Ronald Reagan. Can you remember when Ronald Reagan was the worst thing we had to worry about? It's like, and I was doing political cartoons back then. It was like, oh yeah, it's. I don't want. And by the way, Ronald Reagan did a lot of things that I disagreed with and set the stage for a lot of stuff that came later on. But and again, it's ignorant, but it's like, oh yeah, it was a little bit easier then. And I don't know what, other than politics, I just also like when a young Joan Rivers comes out on stage and she does her act. It's like, oh wow, that's so different than what she became later, but you can see the seeds being planted for what's going to come out. I don't know. I can watch that stuff for hours.
I find it a fascinating part of your personality, because there are people now that are like, they know everything that's on Entertainment Tonight. They know all the stars. But if you ask Brad Geiger, he'll tell you like the B-roll sitcom stars from the 1965 run on CBS.
Absolutely.
And no one else in my life that I know knows this.
Yes.
The only other person that I ever talked to that knows as many B-roll sitcom stars is Norman Lear. It's you and Norman Lear. They're the only two people I've talked to.
We're the only two people who still remember Pat Harrington.
Yeah, but he worked with Pat Harrington and Brad.
And I'll just let you at home Google that one. But,
yeah, exactly. But I find it fascinating. It's an interesting part of your personality. You're like the kid. The reason why I asked if you didn't have TV in your youth is because it feels like the kid that mom and dad didn't let them have sugary drinks.
Yeah.
And now they're 30 and they only drink Coca-Cola. Because they're like, I didn't get Coke for 15 years. I'm having Coke all the time. It's like no one let you watch The Addams Family when you were a kid growing up in Bad Axe, Michigan. You're like, damn it, now I'm watching The Addams Family.
Nonstop for hours and hours.
But anyway, so you were going to say, though, about commercials. I cut you off about that.
I've seen TV commercials for the first time in a long time. And I'm telling you, I've been away for maybe too long, maybe not long enough. This is a commercial I heard in between station breaks on the Tonight Show channel. Just listen to this.
Baby born magic, potty surprise. Teach her to go potty, get a surprise. Feed a yummy snack, sippy cup, now see. Potty time, put her on the potty. Ooh, glitter pee. Purple, pink, or blue, now go potty too. She poofs charms. Baby born magic potty surprise. Poops magic charms for you. Baby born magic potty surprise, peas glitter, and poops charms. With 30 surprises. Dolls each sold separately.
Baby Magic, Dave. Baby Magic, peas glitter, and poops charms.
What? What? Peas glitter and poops charms?
Can you imagine what we're setting the next generation up with? How disappointed they're going to be when they have kids of their own?
That damn jingle is already in my head. I forget the words, but it was da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I poop a charm and it scratches my butt.
Oh my God. The kid poops a charm, and then the kid's got a little plastic charm bracelet. They put the charm right on her wrist.
No, they don't put the charm on a bracelet.
They take it out of the potty onto the wrist. Boom, boom. 2 seconds.
What?
Not even a rinse. Just right on the wrist with you.
And then the kid runs out with this charm on their bracelet going, Mommy, look what came out of my doll's ass.
And the glitter pee. They're going to be so disappointed when they find out there's no pee and glitter.
Brad, okay, oh boy, I have a lot to talk about in this, having worked at Mattel. But
here.
Let me tell you, in all the time we ever did parent testing for toys, the one aspect of toys that every parent hated is like, am I going to spend a half an hour cleaning up this damn thing? Right. And this sounds like an absolute train wreck of a mess.
Oh my God. Well, you basically, you feed the baby this powder, then you give the baby a sippy cup. It mixes in the baby's internal organs and comes out as glitter pee.
Oh my God.
So I don't know how you got, do you dehydrate it so you can reuse it? Or do you keep buying powder pea packets? I don't know what happens. And it also said...
It's probably like Gillette. Like, they make their money in selling you the blades. They make your money in selling you the poop packets.
The doll just costs $10, but those poop packets are going to get you in for $120 by the time the year's over.
So remember when Tickle Me Elmo came out, and then for 3 years they modified it to try to upsell you with what is the upsell of this doll the next year of I've already seen now she makes grunting noises as she passes a charm.
No, it isn't enough that she pees glitter and she poops charms. This new one, she vomits 50% off coupons for the local Krogers. It's a new it's a new doll. She all of the body implements are monetized.
And
now.
then as you expand the toy line, it's like, what was the name of the doll, by the way? Magic Time
Magic
Potty?
Baby Surprise.
Magic Baby Surprise.
That's a hell of a surprise. You pee and glitter. That's a surprise.
So next Christmas, there's a pal doll that's just called Take a Dump Derek. And he's like, he comes out at the same time. He's like, we're ready to go. All right, now she's got a pal. Hi, Take a Dump Derek.
Take a dump, Derek.
Take a dump, Derek.
Oh man,
he passes solid gold chains. That's what.
And imagine your life is just a hellscape of these gold these plastic chains. Later on, again, there's going to be a lot of disappointment. Those charms are not going to be worth what you think they are.
Also, what's going on with this doll's internal organs? Like, you open heart surgery with this doll reveals she has like a travel monopoly inside, you know?
Oh no, I'm passing a thimble.
Oh no, I'm passing a game of life. Oh no.
You ever try to pass a plastic butterfly? It is not easy.
The song is still in my head though. I love how. What is this marketing meeting though?
All
right, boys. Here's what we're gonna do. It's a doll. She craps butterflies.
Yeah. Do you keep a straight face at that meeting? Yeah. And we're gonna build it out. We've got a new one. We're gonna hit the religious group. She's gonna poop a rosary.
She poops charms. That's literally like. Didn't they actually say that in the song? She poops charms.
Yeah.
Oh
Holy shit. You didn't think I was just throwing the rosary out there to be offensive. No, I had a joke. I had a punchline there, Dave.
On that note, speaking of charm, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to the Charming Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal, Dave Kellett, the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. First, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for this week, the good folks at Wacom at wacom.com, the makers of the Wacom One. Brad and I wholeheartedly endorse it as longtime users of the Cintiqs and the Wacom lines, and we cannot be happy to have them as sponsors of the show. So we thank them at wacom.com, the makers of the Wacom One.
Absolutely. And this week, we're going to kick off the show. Dave, this is a great topic. You want to hear this?
Is it better than a doll pooping charms?
Yeah,
yes, I'm immediately ready to move on from that.
After that, there's no place but up to go. We've got a question from one of our $5 Patreon backers who's named Richard Joy, who says, "Hi, Dave and Brad." He says, "In my sports days, we used to say that the best coach is a mediocre athlete that tried like hell to get good. The idea was that they would know lots of techniques to overcome their shortcomings so they could help you with yours." Do you think that something similar applies with comics and or other creative pursuits? In other words, what qualities do you think makes a good mentor? Bonus question: how well do you think you personally fit in some or all of those qualities? Thanks so much for the tons of education and entertainment you've put into the world, David Kellett. Let's talk about coaching and mentoring more specifically. What makes a good mentor?
All right. Well, first of all, Richard, thank you for the kind words there. I appreciate that. I actually think that that's a really good, similar, parallel description to describe a good cartooning teachers and art teachers, because though I am not a teacher, I like to think that the podcast is somewhat of a teaching event.
Without a doubt.
This is the way emotionally I'm most comfortable teaching. I don't like, you and I have talked about this before, Brad, on the show. I don't particularly love classroom teaching, but this podcasting environment, I really like sharing what I know in this. And so this is sort of my way of gifting back, to cartooning.
Oh, this is way better than teaching in a classroom. Nobody talks back in this.
You know what? And not even being sarcastic, that might be a part of why I like it. Yeah. I get enough two-way communication on Twitter and on Instagram that I'm like, no, I'm happy just doing one way and just laughing with you. But anyway, so Richard, to answer your question, I very much think of myself as a mediocre cartoonist who learned how to hustle their way into a career. I know and am familiar and am friends with people who have just an unending amount of raw talent that they have also harnessed, but an unending amount of raw talent. But I never really found them to be hustlers, I guess, in the sense of like putting in decades of work. They had it right to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if they didn't have it, it didn't take that much. It's kind of like the student in your class that was like, got A's no matter if they studied the night before or not.
Yeah.
They just got it. You know, they had it down.
Right.
And for me, and I don't think Brad would mind me saying this. I think both Brad and I hustled. Like, I remember in my 20s, maybe not so much now, but in my 20s, you were a better cartoonist than I was. Not you. I'm saying the generic you.
Yeah.
You might have been a better cartoonist than I was.
I know you're not talking about me.
In my 20s, I would always say to the world, like, you might be a better cartoonist than I am, but no one's going to outwork me. And I was just churning out 7 days a week cartoonings, plus doing eBay drawings, plus putting together books, plus, like, in my 20s, I was a machine before I had kids, because I was like, I'm gonna get good, and I'm going to get as good as I can, and I'm going to work as hard as I can. Because my mom actually gave me a good bit of advice one time. You know, she's like, there will always come a spot that's open, and if you're ready for it, she was at the time talking about newspaper jobs, but she's like, you know, at some point, someone's going to die. At some point, someone's going to quit, and then a position's going to be open. And if it's sort of that preparedness meets luck type of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was always of the attitude that I was going to outwork them. And Brad, I think you were of the same type, right?
Yeah. Well, there was a couple things going on with me. So one thing, I'm a little bit unlike you in that I really enjoy the teaching part. I really thrive on that. And that's kind of what brought me to teaching in college, doing webcomics.com, you know, writing the webcomics handbook. I like that. I like sharing information, even in the very beginning when I didn't have a lot of information to share, but I also was good at finding information and finding, like, if I didn't know the right answer, I could easily find it for people.
Right.
But that comes from a deeper place. And when this person wrote the question in, it brought up a really brilliant memory and set of memories for me. And it really kind of brought into harsh relief, like, why I am the way I am. And really it all has to do with my dad. I think about how what I do is so similar to what he did. So my dad was a small town sports hero, right? I've told you that before. And he was very, very athletic, very good at that stuff. And when I was a young kid, he was a softball coach. His game was softball, baseball and softball, but mainly they were playing softball up in the thumb of Michigan. And when I was a really young kid, he was a player and a coach. But by the time I really was old enough to pay attention, he had shifted all the way into coaching. And that was our life. You know, he was a factory worker by day. We had enough so that his income was mostly the family income. My mom had done some babysitting to kind of tie up loose ends financially, but that was a time and a place in America where you could have mainly a single income. And we had health insurance, and you know, we had enough to eat. We had a good home, 5 kids, but we weren't slapping over with cash either. So we didn't do a lot of vacations. Our vacation, I always tell people, is if Dad made the playoffs and they went to regionals, and we'd leave, you know, to go to another part of Michigan for regionals, or, you know, God help us, states. We'd go to some place and stay in a hotel that had a swimming pool. That was living high on the hog for the Geiger family. But my memories of my dad during these games and during these tournaments are kind of visceral, in that I remember him, nurturing these young players during practices. You know, if there was one player who was really struggling and really in a slump, you know, a certain player he might take and put his arm around him and kind of josh with him a little bit and joke with them and kind of loosen him up and kind of elbow to the ribs and get that player feeling more comfortable and more confident and less like he's under the gun. And then I'd see that player come back the next time and during a game and blossom. And part of that was because I'd seen my dad during those practices take an extra time with this young kid and saying, here's, you know, you're making this too complicated. Settle down. You're going to be fine. And then at other times, I would see him take a player that was having a different type of problem during a practice, and he'd get a little bit harsher with that guy, maybe get in his face a little bit, and use some sharper words, and get right into him. And I'd see that guy come out in the next game and have amazing results. And somehow my dad, he knew when to give you an elbow to the ribs, and he knew when to pull your ear a little bit and get your attention in a different way. And I would see them play these games and come down to the last innings, when it's tied up going into the ninth, those kind of situations in baseball and softball. And I would see him gather his players around him, and he would start to talk. And he just through what he said and what he built with his words and what he was able to inspire in those players, just by a huddle, he'd end up winning more games than losing. Nothing's 100%, but so many times I saw him rally his players with nothing more than the words that he used.
Right.
And when I saw this question, all that came washing back, because that's nice. What I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to be as good as my dad was. And I was never an athlete, look at me. But in my chosen thing, in this thing that I've found my love for, the same way he found his love for sports and baseball, and later on he's coaching bowling now. In that same way, I kind of want to be like my dad. I want to take somebody who is struggling and find the right words that gets through to that person and helps them get to the next place.
I know you do that because you do that for me all the time with comics. I love doing the show mainly because I love laughing with you and I love talking comics, obviously, but also you have, I know a fair amount about comics, but you have insights that I've never even considered before about comics. And you have honestly changed and steered the course of my career in the 2 decades that I've known you. Sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in ways that neither you nor I will ever know. But there are ways I could point to a half dozen right away that were big course corrections where I was like, Brad was the one that taught me how to do that. Brad was the one that told me to do that. So I know you do that. You are very much living up to your father's footsteps in that regard.
Well, nothing that you could say would make me feel prouder than that, because that really is kind of where that comes from. Is that inner John Geiger trying to come out a little bit and
well, the thing one of the messages that I've said in both my comics, both Sheldon and Drive, is that we only have a limited time in this life, in the course of this life. And so my philosophy is that our job is to make this place better before we go.
Right.
That's our job. Our job is to just, you arrived and it was in a certain condition, make it better. Make the people around you better, make the people that read you better, make the world a little bit happier, a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little bit more opportunity. That's our job. And so I think you have a similar attitude with the way you teach comics, is that comics were at this level when you entered, and you want to make it just a little bit better by the time you go, And I've seen that in the people that come up to you at Comic-Cons too. And so anyway, I don't mean to make this a Brad Geiger praise session, but I think you're doing it. And it is literally the best part of my week to sit and talk comics with you. We're totally off of Richard's question now. Now it's just me complimenting Brad.
I've got no complaints.
Thank you for your question, Richard. Brad, I think you're great. That's me for the next 20 minutes.
No, but what he's saying there is absolutely right. In that, I also fall into that category of kind of like not a mediocre cartoonist, somebody that came in. If you look at the stuff I was doing in 2000, I was not setting the world on fire. I had to struggle and I had to piece things together. I had to learn some things the hard way. I had to take some advice sometimes that I didn't want to take. But I've had that experience. I know what it's like to struggle with trying to do better, and so that's what makes me so passionate about this, because it's like
a lot of people who come to the show and might not know us that well might assume that you and I have gigantic audiences now, which is false.
Right.
We still, for lack of a better phrase, hustle for the living that we have with the historically comparatively tiny audience that we have compared to Schultz or Davis or Lynn Johnston or Kathy Geiswhite or anybody. You know, we have a sliver of the audience they have.
Right.
But we have learned how to hustle and make a go of it. But it's true though. Like I am proud of the fact that we are. I don't want to say mediocre cartoonists in the sense that talentless, but mediocre in the sense that like. I don't know, superstardom was never in the cards for us, but I'm very happy that we were able to build a career with the talents and the gifts and the moments that we were given.
Yeah.
And I try to pass that along because I guess a tiny part of me feels like if I can do it, well, surely somebody else could do it.
Yeah.
If with the talents that I have, if I was able to muster it, then you could do it.
It's
that kind
also
of a thing.
frustrating to see somebody making a mistake.
Oh.
And it's frustrating to see that and say, "Oh, come on, I can give you some thoughts there. I can help you get past there." Why? Because I've made all the mistakes.
I think I'll tell you one thing because I know Brad. The thing that actually absolutely chaps our ass more than anything else is the cartoonist for whom life has given them all the talents, all the gifts, and they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And we know a few people, Brad, and we could name the names, we won't name them, where their art skill is amazing, their writing skill is amazing.
Yeah.
But it's like that biblical story of burying the money. You're like, what are you doing? Why are you not cartooning more? Why are you not doing the stuff?
Do the thing. Just
do the thing. You're so good at it. Do it. You have all the natural gifts. Anyway, so but yeah, I think that, Richard, to finish off your thought, I think yes, there's a lot of similarities to the idea that the athlete who was not the fastest, was not the strongest, was not the tallest, couldn't throw the farthest, whatever it is, and yet really figured out a way with the gifts that they had to make a career in sports. And I think both Brad and I really heavily identify with that. And I think, frankly, most cartoonists would identify that. Like, unless you're Charles Schultz, although even Charles Schultz hated himself on the average day. So most of us identify with the cartoonist that's not as stellar as they want to be, but learn how to hustle and make it work. And I think... So even if you are the incredible talent for our age, there is still incredible value in learning the hustle and learning how to make it work with all the skill sets you can.
And a lot of value in passing that along. Like when you do learn something, it's important that you take a second to send the elevator back down to that next generation that Dave and I are never going to reach because we don't even know where they're hanging out. But if you're younger, you do. So your job is now, if you're listening to this, to do the same, to take what you learned and help that next generation up, because that is what has completely separated, in my opinion, us from our predecessors of syndicated comics. Right? You had that early syndicated comics scene that had stuff like Apprentices and stuff, and that's how the younger generation came up. Then for a big chunk there, that really didn't exist. And then we came along, the upstarts that we were, and completely pissed off the syndicated comics people, and they were very worried about what we were doing. But the one thing that made us different is that we immediately, on day one, started communicating back and forth. I got to go back and see. I bet you somewhere I still have the first email that I sent you, Dave, from our Keen Spot days when we were.
Really?
I'm sure if I go back, because I throw nothing away.
I would love if my response is, please stop emailing me.
Please, I've had enough Brad Geigers. Data Dano.
Little did I know, 20 years later, still emailing me.
But we started communicating. We started information sharing. We started sharing that stuff freely. That's the thing that really separated us from my perception of that older generation. And your job listening at home is to keep that going, because it did amazing things for people like Dave and I, being able to share information. Your job is to keep it going.
Exactly. And because one of the big key insights that we had very early on in webcomics was that it was not a zero-sum game of success.
Right.
In fact, the opposite was true.
Exactly.
like with syndicated newspaper strips, because there was only 1, 2, 3 spots open every year, it was like Battle of the Network Stars. What a weird reference, Battle of the Network Stars.
Speaking of anachronistic television.
I know, that was such an anachronistic. It was basically like lions in the savannah fighting over a carcass, trying to get that one spot in the newspaper. Whereas for me to succeed, I didn't need Brad to fail.
Right.
In fact, me encouraging Brad to succeed raised a whole ecosystem of readers, right?
Yes.
But it also meant that Brad, at some key future moment, might pay me back with some bit of advice or some information that he had learned. And so those early years of webcomics were really instructive to the fact that, like, no, let's raise up a whole generation of amazing cartoonists because it raises the ecosystem, it makes more and better cartoons, and frankly brought voices to comics that we hadn't seen in decades, if ever.
Yeah.
Which is still a continuing wonderful thing that webcomics are doing. And so, yeah, I was with you that in those early years, we learned really quickly that it was better to share than to hold information tightly to your chest and not share it, you know?
Yep, absolutely. And I'm glad we did.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So, Dave, as we're coming back from the break, I just wanted to say thank you for all of our backers that joined us over at ComicLab Cash Grab.
That's right. ComicLab Cash Grab, I think by the time this show airs, will have wrapped up.
Yes.
And I was pleasantly surprised to see how many folks wanted to jump in on the 4 C's of social media, Megan. So thank you all.
I was really surprised. And part of it, I think we've got to give credit to that tremendous design by your assistant, Beth, who knocked it out of the park.
She did amazing work, yes.
But also just thank you so much to our Patreon backers and others that jumped in so quickly and elevated this to levels that were truly eyebrow-raising.
And I have to say, because I am now, 20 years into my career, and this is the first time I have done a Quickstarter, which is a unique type of platform on Kickstarter. The idea being that you do it for under 2 weeks or less, and you do a really simple Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And it's for a small, almost throwaway item, right? And I have to say, I don't know that I will do it again in the immediate future just because I don't have any other products for it. But it's something that I would repeat. The process was pleasant, don't you think, Brad?
Yeah. Yeah, this was nice. And it's also nice to have a Kickstarter that only goes 2 weeks.
Yes.
You don't, as a creator, you don't have Kickstarter fatigue.
Yeah, and also it is because it's sort of throwaway, and like, guys, clearly this is just a fun product we're making. Yeah. There was a sort of joy to it that a normal, so, when you're making a book, you're like, oh, please back it. I want to make this book. It's so expensive to print. But so anyway, so thank you all for joining us over at ComicLab Cash Grab, and rest assured that is a URL we will be using again in the future because nothing has brought me more joy in recent weeks than saying ComicLab Cash Grab.
So, Dave, do you have a question from a $5 Patreon backer?
I do. Coming in from Nemo over at patreon.com/ComicLab. Nemo writes, Brad and Dave, do you think it is possible to be too nice to a creator? And what was the nicest compliment you ever got? So, Brad, Nemo asked a question for you. Is it possible first to be too nice to a creator? Too nice?
Oh, no, it is not. It is, well, okay. It is possible to be creepy.
Yeah, that was my immediate caveat.
Yeah, and that's not a put down. Sometimes even if you're really trying to be nice, you've got to take a moment and think about how this is being received on the other side, and maybe change your messaging a little bit and so forth. But in terms of genuine kindness, no, it's not possible to be too nice. It's not possible to be too effusive because but everybody likes to get compliments.
Yes.
And we're no different, right?
Well, absolutely. So, boy, I have a lot of thoughts on this. It's a very simple question, Nemo, but I have a lot of thoughts on this. One is, on the point of creepiness, the simplest way to avoid creepiness is to remember what the relationship is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not a friendship in the traditional human sense of we used to live with packs of 100 or so humans and we would all be familiar with one another.
Right.
You online, you are literally a faceless relationship of text and emails and tweets and all that sort of stuff, right? And the relationship is, I like your work. Thank you for your work. And when you keep it on that plane, never creepy, right? Never creepy.
Cannot
I like your work.
creepy.
Your work brings me joy. Thank you for your work. Oh, I laughed at today's, all that sort of stuff. As soon as you start dancing into the realm of the personal, that's when it gets creepy. So even if it's in the friendliest terms, if I start saying, hey, Brad, how are the kids?
Yeah,
Brad, how's your marriage going? Hey, Brad, who in your house is responsible for doing the dishes? You can immediately see the creepiness factor coming in because that's not what that relationship is.
Right.
You are not friends in the traditional physical sense. And so keep the relationship on the work. And that's totally wholesome and delightful and wonderful. And that's what every creator wants. So that's my one thought on creepiness. My other thought on can you be too nice is, God, no, you really can't be too nice. And I'll tell you why. Because one kind word immediately washes away. In the same unfortunate thing that one negative comment will linger for weeks. And you'll be brushing your teeth and you'll be thinking about that one person that said that you drew Sheldon with eyes too big. And you're brushing your teeth mad about it. And and then and part of that is because the basic evolution of the human mind, right? As a difference engine, the human mind is looking for threats. Right. Because when you were in that pack of 100 humans, you were worried about the one dire wolf that could come out of the forest and eat you. And so you were on the keeping your head on a swivel for threats. Yeah. And so there is a tiny part of your brain that reacts to negativity online as though it were that evolutionary threat that you were watching out for when you were on the edge of a forest, right? Now, kindness, of course, in all the wonderfulness that a human heart can take in, kindness is loved, is cherished, is wonderful. It gets washed away compared to that threat matrix that a negative comment has. Don't you think, Brad? Don't you think there's something to that evolutionarily speaking?
No, that's 100% right. That's 1,000% right. And that's why, again, that's why, honest to goodness, one of the 4 C's of social media is kindness, because sometimes we need to be reminded that it's okay to make a kind comment. In fact, sometimes when you're looking for something to say, so many of us, and if you're a webcomics reader, you're not thinking only I need to post something on Twitter right now. But, if you're a webcomics creator, sometimes you're like, oh, I should post something. Sometimes we need a little nudge to say, if you've got nothing else to say, find something nice to say about somebody else.
Right.
And that can be as brand building as any other thing you could do on social media, because when you're pointing to somebody else and saying, I like the way you did XYZ, you're saying not only something good to that creator, but you're saying scores about yourself, what you value, what you recognize, what you like to see in the world. And that's very important too.
Right. A lot of people that come from, I don't want to say broken, but different emotional backgrounds view kindness as weakness, right? Like you're showing your underbelly, like I can't be kind about that. But I see kindness as a strength because you're so confident in who you are that it's perfectly fine to say, Brad, you bring joy into my life.
Yes.
Honestly, you bring joy into my life. And so that kindness, Brad's smiling.
I am. I'm
just
beaming
Brad,
from ear to ear.
Now, how does that make me weak to say, Brad, you bring me joy? If anything, that strengthens my feelings, the empathy that we both have for each other, the sympathy, the goodwill that we have for each other. So basic kindness works. And I'll tell you, you had asked Nemo about what was the nicest compliment that I ever got. And I'll tell you, because unfortunately I'm getting a lot more of them as the pandemic happens, is when someone says that my comics or my podcast or a joke that I had or something saved them in a really dark moment. There's only been a handful of them that have said, and this is literally over 20 years, so I'm not bragging. It's a handful of them over 20 years have said, I was incredibly suicidal and your comics archives saved me when shit was falling apart in my life or when my house was not a happy place to be. And Brad, there's no higher compliment for a cartoonist than that. Literally a life-saving moment. Because I have had those moments of depression where art saved me. And so I know what that is, that art can be salvific. And when it happens, it is literally the artist reaching through their work to say, you are not alone. This moment will pass.
Yeah.
There are moments of brightness in your future. Things will get better. And so when someone says that to me about my art, dear God, that sticks with me for a while. I remember those emails where like, Dave, you saved me from suicide. It's like, holy shit, that's amazing. So I don't know, Nemo. That to me was the nicest compliment. Was because it's so affirming, you know?
Yeah.
But frankly, even Brad, even the kind comments that we get that are just throwaway are like, that lifts you up during the day, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, that's again, every now and again, I'll completely tell on myself. Just the ComicLab podcast. Every now and again, when I'm feeling kind of grouchy and feeling like the world is kind of tilting the wrong way, I'll just pull up in Apple Podcasts. I'll pull up ComicLab and just read the reviews. Oh, because one after another is just like boy, you guys are good friends. You can hear the friendship come through, and you taught me something I didn't know, and all of those things that I just feed on. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm not a dope. I'm just I'm a nice guy that sometimes does dopey things.
But it's also one of the reasons why we share those kind words on the podcast, in part, is to teach by doing, and to show you that kind words can foster kind words, and it is a cycle of positivity that can infect your art and your life and your personal relationships. And so, my God, tell the people that in your life that you love them. We're all 2 weeks away from death if we sneezed on the wrong person. So for God's sakes, tell the people in your life that you love them. There's nothing wrong with kindness. But anyway, so Brad, what for you is it? What is the comments that stand out for you as kindness, where you're like, oh, that really changed my day?
Kindness.
What triggers your heart?
So triggering my heart, the ones that stood out for me. Among the ones that you were saying, like, you helped me out of a really dark place in my life. Every now and again, I'll hear from somebody who was stationed overseas in a really difficult situation.
Yeah.
And they'll say, you know what, I was over there and, it was very difficult. But the one thing that I really looked forward to, it was being able to catch up and read Evil Inc. and stuff like that. I like hearing that too. Just hearing that you helped somebody who was, in a strange place, doing difficult things, and hearing that you were a little bit of a reminder of home and a little bit of a heartbeat there.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff always made me feel kind of good too.
Yeah. Well, in that moment, being shipped overseas or starting at a new university or in a new job in a new city, what they're saying is, I'm alone and I don't feel so alone when I read your comics.
Right.
And so even that is a form of kinship, of friendship through the page or through the comic. And so, gosh, how wonderful. Yeah. So no, Nemo, to put a button on it, I erring on the side of kindness, which is a different way of saying your question, is I think it's never a bad idea. And because in as much as we're making a living from comics, Brad and I could have made an infinitely more lucrative career in accounting or in some, like, you don't do this for the money. In part, you do it for the connection that your art can make with other humans, and for hopefully the little spark of joy that you can bring them. So to hear back from that, I guess it's a form of payment, not in any cheap way, in a lovely way. And so, I think, so to answer your question, Nemo, I think, yes, kindness, boy, you can't go too far. Just, do keep it always in the realm of the art and its impact on your life, and try to avoid the personal with the artist, because that can get creepy quick. But anyway, let's jump in on Dorian. on Dorian Gray has a question for us, Brad, over at patreon.com/ComicLab.
I loved his portrait.
Oh, Bradley. How often do you think Dorian has to hear that?
Oh, every damn time. And if he writes us another question, he's going to hear it again.
Up in the attic. Up in the attic is that painting. What a great story device, though. Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
What a great, he was brilliant in so many ways. Mm-hmm. He and Mark Twain, in terms of like just cutting you down with a single phrase, woohoo! He was amazing. But Dorian Gray as a storytelling device is an amazing story.
How many of us cartoonists have used that concept, the portrait of Dorian Gray, in a single panel comic? And just like, I know I've used it about 3 different times. Oh, yeah.
I've seen ones that you've done. We all have our go-tos. For me, my go-tos are always Lord of the Rings and Dune. I always go back to those. and so that's totally fine that I haven't done Dorian Gray, but we all have the like going back to the well on, and we know it's a guilty pleasure that we love, and that's that. Anyway, Dorian writes in, I have a question for Brad and Dave. How long until you, quote, make it? When the two of you started, you were updating 5 to 7 days a week. Let's say that at that breakneck pace, it took you each a decade to make it. Now that the ad market has died and Patreon is the main income, you recommend that artists update less often, even intermittently. With less forced practice, do you think it will take people longer to, quote, make it? Or do you think that fewer but better comics will help people make it, quote, sooner? Thanks for the laughs, Dorian. Brad, this is a great question. I'm very fascinated to hear your answer on this because
I sure hope the answer is no, because I would feel like a real jerk if I was giving you advice that ended up in you taking a longer time to make it. And I'm pretty confident that I'm not. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because having lived through that time of doing 5 days a week, every week for years, I can tell you that a lot of that stuff I rushed through. I didn't think it through well enough, and I didn't do a very good job at it. I did a very good job of consistency. I did a very good job of frequency. I did not do a very good job, and Greystone Inn is still out there. You can see it for yourself. I didn't do a great job of quality.
Yeah.
And that's because I was focused so much on getting the next one out, I didn't pay enough time on paying attention to this one.
Yeah, you're right. Boy.
So I was in such a rush.
I had a very different answer going into this, and now I might amend it because I was going to say, it might take you longer.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing what I'm saying, or my immediate reaction was from a technical standpoint, right? Whereas you're saying the editorial eye, in some respects, whether you're working constantly or whether you're working, let's say, intermittently, it's the editorial eye is still going to take you 3, 5, 7, 10 years to develop naturally anyway. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying? Like, regardless of frequency?
I'm also saying this. You're paying what I'm advocating is for you to pay attention to what you're doing more and to focus on doing the quality. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. It's the difference between spending 30 hours on getting 5 comic strips out and spending roughly the same amount of time on maybe getting 2 out. You're still spending the same amount of time. You're just focusing more on getting those 2 really, really good before you put them out. You're still putting that time in. You're still at that drawing board. But what I'm advocating is not to worry about putting one out, but to spend that same or similar amount of time to get one good one.
Yeah.
And it's not about quantity, it's about quality. You're still putting the time in, and that's where I think you're still going to progress and get to, you're going to still get that 10,000 hours in that they talk about in mastering an activity. But at the end of that 10,000 hours, you might not have 1,000 comics that are mediocre. Maybe you'll have 250 that are really good.
Interesting. I see your point. I think there is value there. I'm a little bit of a contrarian because I'm very much of that opinion that, and you were the one that said it, that you can't get worse at something that you do every day. Mm-hmm. And I think you're still saying that you're doing it every day. You're just saying the output is diminished, right?
Yes.
So you're still saying that. I guess, though, Wiley Miller of Non Sequitur, the comic strip Non Sequitur, once had a comment that said, first you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast, right? And I look at my comics career as basically the encapsulation of that. First, I got pretty good, and then I got fast, and now I'm fast at being pretty good, and so But I think that I got there by the fact that I went through, of the 4,000 Sheldon strips, those first 1,000, there were probably 50 good ones, you know? And so that means 950 were not that great. But maybe I just had to burn through those, which is a little bit different way of saying what you're saying, which is maybe I should have just produced 400 Sheldons instead of 1,000 Sheldons. And then the quality would have been better, even though the output wouldn't have been as high. It's an interesting question. I could see arguments in both ways. I want to argue the contrarian thing, which is like, no, say what you will, you are going to get better faster if you're producing a comic strip a day, right?
Yeah. My problem with that is I look back during that time and I don't know how much attention I was paying to those comics.
And that's why I'm hesitant, because I do agree with you that
we were cranking them out.
Let's just say from an editorial standpoint, separate from the line art on the page, from a writing and editorial standpoint, here was Dave Kellett most 11 o'clock nights when he knew he had to go to Mattel the next morning. I would get an idea and I'd be like, yep, good enough. We're going with it.
It's an idea.
This is what we're running with. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I do agree with you on that front. So I know what you're saying is that a lot of it was, for lack of a better phrase, crapped out. You know, we would crap it out because we knew we had to do 7 days a week.
And how many times did we do, because we both were doing comic strips at that point, and the go-to, at least for me, was to have a theme for a week. This week, the theme is vampires. A vampire shows up at Greystone Inn. Great. How many different vampire jokes can I do?
Right. And at the end, by the way, just squeezing blood from a stone, you know?
Literally. And
because it was a vampire joke.
Because he's a vampire. But I would, Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, boom, boom, boom. I could write. By Thursday, my editorial bar had dropped. It's like, is this good enough? Like you said, yeah, we're going with it. And I did a lot of punchlines that were technically funny, but in other words, I could explain to you why they were funny. But let's face it, if I had to explain to you why they were funny, they weren't actually funny.
You
they were just
described
technically
the first third
funny.
of my archives. Yep, exactly.
So, but it would have been more valuable, and perhaps looking back, to say, no, I'm just going to do the good ones and focus on taking those ideas and really, instead of doing Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday that were pretty good,
right,
doing maybe 2 that were really good and experiencing what it took to get them to really good. Because I'll tell you what else happened during those early days. I built a lot of bad habits. I built a lot of times where you hear me say on the show all the time, hold your feet to the fire when it comes to writing. Don't let yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
I that's because I had to break myself of the habit of always letting myself off the hook and saying, oh yeah, that's good enough. Well, good enough is in today's landscape where our listeners are building their audience, not like back in the day. I don't know that you can be good enough. You've got to grab your audience when you got them. Hey, you got to get them while they got their eyeballs on you.
I see what you're saying. You get one chance in their social media feed, and then you're drifting to the bottom. So you might as well have your best stuff.
So it's that's why I put much more emphasis these days on quality over quantity, because again, back when you and I were first doing this, we had a different experience. We had very much similar to a newspaper syndicated strip. We had a confined audience. We had a captive audience. Yeah. Because once they found us, they bookmarked us, and the idea was to get them to come back day after day after day. Now, this is not the way anybody consumes content anymore. Again, you're sitting in front of a smorgasbord with a conveyor belt taking food across you, and you got to be really, really attractive as your cupcake goes across, because they might not see it again for a while. You've got to make that connection. That's why I'm all about quality over quantity these days.
You're making a lot of good points. It's funny because my contrarian side also speaks to having really loved science fiction as a kid. I read a lot of science fiction authors from like the golden age that they cut their teeth in that period of science fiction where you were paid by the word and it was a minuscule amount. So they all learned, all of them, Bradbury, Asimov, whoever it was, they learned to just crank out stories, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those early ones, not great, but there's a couple shining gems. But for the most part, they cut their teeth because they were producing volume like we were doing in our early days.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing so, they got to a destination, which was to be a good writer. And a part of me is like, well, that they couldn't have done it other than to have cranked out a bunch of shitty novels in order to get to the, Fahrenheit 451 or whatever it was. So, but that's, I don't know. But I see value in what you're saying too. I'm of two minds. Dorian, I am so unhelpful on this question.
Indecision may or may not be your problem.
I guess it's also it's the realization with age that there are many paths to the same mountain.
Yes.
And I would, if I had to make the choice, I would recreate my path almost exactly, like all my failings and my successes. Like I'm happy with the path that I took. But I also realized, Dorian, that there are cartoonists, both my peers and coming up right now, that are taking drastically different choices and making it work. And so part of it is, I think both Brad and I would say, commitment is a big one, regardless of output. You've got to be committed. You've got to be drawing and working every day, even if you're not output. Right. I think consistency has to be clear so that no matter how frequently your comics are coming out, they are consistently of the same quality, right? Yeah. If not getting better, but consistently of the same quality. And I think the joy has to be, again, consistently in each comic, so that even if you're only producing 1 a week or 3 a week or 7 a week, that if there is joy in there and it's coming through on the page, that's all you can do, And so as far as the technically getting better, both as a writer and as an illustrator, even though Brad and I might differ a little bit on that, I think broadly speaking, we're on the same page. That
Yeah, because you still have to put the time in. You still have to put the time in.
Yep.
We may disagree on the number of comics that you should be putting out per week, but we agree and are in lockstep in the number of hours you should be putting in.
Right.
And that
this is not a question that we had prepared for the show, Brad, but if you could go back and redo your career, would you change anything?
Are you plopping me back in the year 2000, or are you saying you've got to restart today in 2020 and build from there?
Oh,
because that's significant.
Both of those are fun questions. I was thinking plopping you back in 2000.
Put me back in 2000, and I would do everything exactly the same. I can't think of anything significantly that I would change, other than, like I said, I in the past, I'd maybe like to see if I could talk myself out of ending Greystone Inn a little bit sooner. But then, like my wife always reminds me, you would have never listened to that person because you weren't ready for it yet. You weren't there yet. You couldn't have been talked into it. So yeah, I think because also I look back on the mistakes I made, and I learned such amazingly valuable things from those mistakes. Every contract that I signed that wasn't a great contract. Every time I narrowly avoided signing a contract that wasn't great. All the mistakes I made were really, really useful later on, because there's some things I can guarantee you I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah,
because I screwed it up so badly the first time. So, but that's a good thing. That's something I don't have to worry about in the future. What about you? Would you go back and do it the exact same way?
You know what? Career-wise, yeah, I think I would. Some of the mistakes that I made had to be made, like you said, because it's like touching a hot stove for the first time. You're like, I'm never going to do that again, Right. There are certain lessons that you have to get stung on so badly because, not as though it's a causal event, but for the rest of your career, you benefit from having learned that lesson. Like I will avoid certain, like Brad said, certain contracts. In fact, if anything, my career taught me increasingly to rely on myself as the main driver of my success.
Yes.
Don't rely on a publisher. Don't rely on a distributor. Don't rely on a marketing guy. Don't rely on a publicity person. Dave, you're smart enough. You're strong enough. Go out and do it. That kind of thing.
And don't rely on these platitudes to talk yourself into something being good. Right. Yeah. Somebody the other day said I was kind of pushing them, and this was in the ComicLab Discord server. I was kind of pushing them on why they wanted a certain thing. And their response was, well, because it'll look good on my resume. And I said, listen, you're in comics. we don't read resumes, we read word balloons. And it's like in that moment, it's like, oh yeah. What am I worried about my resume for?
Yeah, exactly.
No, when's the last time you updated your resume, Dave?
Oh my God.
Precisely. But see, we use these platitudes to talk ourselves into believing something's a good thing. Well, this is going to look good on my resume. Dude, there's no resume.
Yeah. The funny thing is, the thing that I would go back and change is the thing that I would change about myself, and I don't know that it's changeable, in that I wish I could go back to 2000 and tell Dave Kellett, the younger cartoonist, to be more sociable with other cartoonists. I wish that 20 years past Dave had made friends quicker in comics. I kind of slow-boated friendships all across comics. Now I think I have some quite delightful comics friends.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if I say that to myself back in 2000, I don't even know that Dave in 2020 is actively going out in the same way that I'm kind of an extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
Like I've said this before. You drop me into a party, there is no one more delightful. I will, and I'm saying this not at all humbly, I will light up a room. I am delightful in a party setting, right? But given the choice, I will always choose to be alone in a quiet room.
Yes.
I am absolutely an extroverted introvert. So me traveling back in 2000 and saying, hey, go out and meet more cartoonists. I don't do that now. I don't actively go out and be like, hey, let's be pals. So I don't know that that's something that's changeable about my personality as an extroverted introvert.
And it's also just the place that you're at. You know, you're only capable of where you are at that moment. And we're all on
it's
a
also now at this
progression.
point in my life, it's kind of like that Seinfeld joke that like, we're not taking new applications. We're fine. We have everyone we need, you know, as far as friendships.
Got a few too many, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, if anything, I'm trying to quietly weed them out. So
yeah. Well, listen, Dave, last week on the show, you put the word out and said, if you're a ComicLab listener, maybe maybe we found out we've got a lot of ComicLab listeners who aren't, doing comics, or comics aren't their first thing. And they're listening to ComicLab and applying the things that we're talking about to their other pursuits, which is fascinating to us. You want to hear some of the responses we got?
Yeah, it's the one that struck me from a week or two back was, I'm still delighted by, I think Brittany was a saddle maker. And that, by the way, Brittany shared some photos, and I think we put them over up on patreon.com/ComicLab. We should.
They are up on the Discord server, but I don't think we put them up on Patreon.
Regardless,
we'll have
beautiful
to do that.
leather working, and it just astounds me that someone a human can make something that pretty out of leather. But anyway, keep going, Brad. What you're going to share some of these.
Here's some of the people. Again, now a couple of these people are doing comics, and if you're listening and you don't do any comics at all, you're really who we're super interested to hear from, because I love hearing. I've heard people saying, well, I'm a jeweler, and I listen to ComicLab and I get all kinds of ideas on how I can approach this differently. So if that's you, by all means, don't hesitate to also drop us a line. But here's one person. He says, I'm a freelance motion graphics designer / video editor. I also draw a webcomic when I can and run a Patreon and YouTube channel. Sure, if I'm working on my comic, there's an obvious one-to-one correlation. But if I'm just working on a paid project, a kids show intro, promo, trailer, TV commercial, etc., I find how I approach pitching, working out a brief, or just engaging with the client has improved because I try to emulate your upbeat, kinder, more positive approach.
Hey, gosh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's really lovely.
Yeah. And then here's another one. Says, I own and operate a retail bra fitting store in addition to being an artist. But a lot of the promotional work and website info you both share on the podcast has definitely helped in both business ventures.
That's delightful.
Yeah. And that's like a thing, getting a proper bra fitting. There's a lot of people walking around with an ill-fitting bra, and it's uncomfortable and not pleasant.
It's always interesting when you talk to a woman who's later in years, but just far enough along with like, good God, I've been wearing the wrong bra configuration for decades.
For many
This has literally
years.
changed my life.
And then they get fitted properly, and it's like, oh my gosh, what a difference. It would be like walking around, if you don't wear a bra in your everyday life, I would say it would be like walking around the wrong pair of shoes, right? If you finally get fitted properly for shoes, you got the same kind of reaction.
This might be, Brad, if this is your way of saying that you're asking me if I can make a recommendation for a tighty whitey fitter for you, then yes, I can find a recommendation in Philadelphia for somebody that can help you with
boxers or briefs. Are you a boxers man or a briefs man?
What's the one that are not boxers, not briefs, but there's a
the hybrid, like boxer briefs?
Boxer briefs. There we go. I couldn't remember what the names are.
Make a choice, man.
Make a choice. I'll tell you that. Look, you know what? Why not? I'll take you on the journey that is Dave Kellett's underwear choices.
Yeah.
As a kid, for like the first, because I think they were like the go-to cheapos when I came from a family of 7 kids.
Yeah.
And so for me, we all got Hanes tighty whities because it was like you could buy a 48 pack for $1 or whatever it was. And my mom was like, "Here you go, throw these on."
Right.
And then someone in college was like, "Oh, boxers is the way to go." I was like, "Oh, look at this, is nice." And then boxer briefs came along, and it was like the best of both worlds. I was like, "This is great. This is what you want. This is what you want to do."
Oh,
how about you, boxers or briefs or boxer briefs?
Had almost the same exact trajectory. Although we were a fruit of the loom family, not a Hanes family. But it was for the same reasons. But then a girl in college bought me my first pair of boxers, and I've never gone back. I like boxers. Boxers was like, this is the way to be.
Boxers. Okay. We didn't intend to launch into this, but I'm going to launch into this. To hell with it. In for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah.
Boxers are loosey-goosey, right? It's a bunch of fabric, all right?
Yeah.
Jeans tend to be pretty tight, as do most slacks. So to me, boxers feel like you've wrapped an American flag around your waist, and now you're trying to shove that into jeans. Like you get bunching and you get scrunching and...
I don't know that it's been that bad. I've been able to make it through a day in jeans.
I don't know, Brad. I feel like you're currently scrunched, and you know it. You're currently scrunched.
Well,
this is a man. You're what's that fallacy when you've committed too far? Is it gambler's fallacy?
Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah. You now have a sunk cost fallacy with boxers because you open a drawer and you've got 40 boxers in there. Like, I can't quit them now. I've got to tell myself the lie that these are comfortable.
No, I can't imagine going back at this point. I'll take my boxers any day of the year.
Have you tried boxer briefs? Have you ever tried them?
No. I really have kind of a like, what the hell would I do that for?
Let me ask you something. For no reason at all, Christmas is coming up. What size are you?
In the waist, I'm a 38.
38. And would you describe that as a medium or a large? Because they normally sell it like...
Probably large. Probably large.
Okay. A 38 large. All right. Well, Christmas is coming. The goose is getting fat. Put Brad's junk in an old man's hat.
That was the other thing I liked about boxers is that most briefs were just white, right? There was nothing going on. Or maybe you'd got a solid color.
Oh, for God's sake. Do you have like Daffy Duck boxers?
What's that?
Do you have like Daffy Duck boxers?
Oh my God. The amount of characters and symbols and writings that are going on my boxers, you don't even want to know.
Your poor wife. Oh my God.
If you're going to wear
like
underwear.
The candles are lit, the wine, it's a Friday night. And here comes Daffy Duck out of those jeans, all bunched up. No one wants this.
There we've got, the candle lights are on and I'm disrobing and it's just Burger King, home of the Whopper. So one more, Dave. I want to share this with you.
All right.
We've got another listener who is a Chinese lion dancer.
Whoa, that's rad! Really?
Have you ever seen that? Now he's quick to point out if you've seen this going on, you probably misidentify it as a dragon, but it's actually a lion, and there's a whole bunch of people inside of there, and obviously they've got to practice, or else they'd be kicking each other and running into each other. It'd look like a drunk lion. But and by the way, these are not people dancing to the boot scoot and boogie. These are not Chinese line dancers. They're Chinese lion dancers, right?
I'm assuming, Brad, you've been to a Chinese New Year festival or parade and all that.
Philadelphia
it's amazing.
has a vibrant Chinatown section, and that's a great thing to go do, especially with the kids, the firecrackers and everything. But he says lion dancing isn't a paid job, it's volunteer, but I have very much dedicated my life to it. I've been training for, listen to this, Dave, 5 years now. I compete internationally with my team, and we won the 2018 championship for the female division in Macau with me as the lion tail.
Oh.
Could you imagine? Now, listen, this is exactly the opposite of Voltron. Voltron, it's all about forming the head. In the lion dancing, I'm betting that the tail, that's the place to be.
The head is where you want to be, because the head of the lion, you get the head of lettuce or the bok choy passed to you, and you got to chew it up and then spit it on the business so that they get the blessing of
that's a good point.
of prosperity and stuff. That's the fun part. Also, the head gets to jump up on the shoulders of, I guess what would be the lion's
front legs,
front hunches. Yeah. I'm assuming that this reader or listener is on a team that's good enough where they do those acrobatics, because holy cow, when the lion starts stacking itself, you're like, I'm all in. I am all in. This is amazing.
Dude, they won the 2018 championships in Macau. They're doing some jumping there. We made a mistake in the 2019 competition that I'm still mourning over. Listen, put it behind.
Hold on, Brad.
If there's one thing you want to talk to a lion's tail, is the importance about putting it behind you.
I can't top
behind you.
I can't top that pun. All right.
Lion dancing is very much my life now, and it's also taken over my art. So that's another ComicLab listener. Would you have ever imagined we had a lion dancer in our audience?
No, and that's why I'm so happy we asked this, because we have in the past gotten architects, we've gotten painters, we've gotten a lot of storyboard artists, obviously.
Jewelers.
We've gotten jewelers, we've gotten leather workers, we've gotten sculptors. I remember there was a sculptor that worked both with found objects and with stone.
Yeah.
And then, what were the other ones? But boy, Lion Dancer is by far the coolest in this patch.
Yeah.
I want to see some video. Forward us some video. Forward us some video. That's great.
There's got to be video from the 2018 championships.
Also, I kind of want to see what a mess up is. So forward us 2019, because I'm sure from an outsider looking in, it's like, oh no, you went slightly left rather than slightly right. Like, what?
You'd
what
have
could
to
that
actually
mess up
tell
be?
us what the mistake was, because we'd never be able to see it. It was so
Although,
small.
no, I guess a true mistake in lion dancing would be if you fell out. That would probably be a mistake.
It just looks like the lion, had regurgitated a human being.
You just kind of do the head down with the one arm up, like, sorry, everybody, sorry, going back under the line now. Sorry, everybody,
you have to do that little vaudeville shuffle. You
just kind of do the sorry, everybody.
Well, listen, speaking,
you fall out of the lion, and you had, like, everyone had told you, like, wear all black. Everybody, come on, it's important, wear all black. But you hadn't done laundry that night before, so you fall out of the lion, and you're wearing your Who Farted shirt, and you're like, I'm so sorry, everybody. Oh, God.
And your boxers that says McDonald's, 20 billion served. Speaking of shuffling on, it's time for us to shuffle our way out of here. You've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, who's going to be receiving a very special gift wrap package in the mail for Christmas this weekend. Not this weekend, but in December. He's the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist and creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, your Arby's boxer shorts are shortly in the mail.
Shortly.
Here's the beef. Co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
That would be the biggest self-own, is if you got Wendy's boxer briefs and it just said, where's the beef on it? The ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. Like this one from Kev Ham, who says via Twitter, holy shit, nearly drove off the road laughing. I love ComicLab podcasts, and if you need joy in your life, you should listen. Trust me. Dave, we drove Kev off the road.
Here I I go in the same show where I admit that like saving a life was the greatest thing in my cartooning, and we also killed the man. That was great. Sorry, Kev. Sorry about that.
We saved your life. We can take you out.
Yeah. It's like when a mother is like, I brought you into this world, I can take you out of this world.
Right.
Anyway, the Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Imagine Brad in boxer briefs.
Comic Lab. So, Dave, listen, I know I was teasing you about sending you some boxers. I would not send you any burger joint for boxers. I would never do that.
That's nice of you.
But Long John Silver's is still on the table.
Long John Silver's.
Does that still even exist?
I don't. If the pandemic hasn't taken it out by now, the health board should have.